Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to have a look at another Gameweek 1 draft for the 26-27 FPL season. But this time we're going to go without Erling Haaland, and we're going to see how we can build a team around other players that we might be able to deploy with that additional cash in our team. For the purpose of the draft, we're also going to be considering a Bench Boost 1 team. Now the idea about a Bench Boost 1 team is because this season we don't have as many cheap goalkeeper and third forward options. Ideally, what we want to be able to do, with the certainty of who's fit and available in Game Week 1 without any suspensions or injuries, we can build a team that captures all 15 players we need to be able to get that bench boost chip out the way early on. And then later on in the season, when we potentially use that first wild card, we can then remove those additional players we put a bit of extra cost into and make a bit of a cheaper team. But anyway, without getting sort of distracted by what might be happening further down the line, we'll just get into this video and have a look what we can make without the draft. So I've prepared a couple of drafts, and in the video we'll use Next 11 as well for their data. The link's in the bio if you want to have a look at what their website can provide for your FPL season, make your team better. But without Erling Haaland, who is £15.5 million record price at FPL, there's a lot of room for manoeuvring, particularly in these teams without him. Now, in goal, if I was to pick two players, particularly I'd be considering is, firstly, because we've got a bit of extra cash, we want to have maybe David Raya at home to Coventry. He looks really good. And another player as well I'd be considering is Roos, the Sunderland goalkeeper who played Ipswich in the first game of the season. I think 11 million, traditionally you wouldn't spend that much on two goalkeepers, but because we're trying to bench boost and we haven't got Haaland in this team, we can afford to put additional bit of capital into our goalkeeping position, target two teams that have just been promoted, hopefully obviously here get a clean sheet and potentially a couple of saves points, maybe for more like for Roos. Now, in defence, one player that has been omitted a lot because of the price of Haaland and generally because he's also increased in price this season as well, a 2 million price rise, is Gabriel here. Now, Gabriel last season, really good stats, a stand-up performer, 3 goals, 5 assists from centre-back, XG, I think, outperformed some midfielders I've even seen, DEFCON as well, regular DEFCON achiever, getting those 2 extra points for the team and defence. Now, another player I'll have a look at as well for defence to round off the Arsenal team is going to be Mosquera. Now, the other Arsenal defenders, apart from Timber and Saliba, who are both now injured, are 5.5 million. So they are a little bit cheaper than the alternatives you can get. Now, whether you want Mosquera, who right now, without any further information about a transfer of Ezri Konsa, for example, we assume will be the starting centre-back alongside Gabriel for the start of the season. We know Saliba's going to be out for a couple of months with an injury. So that means Mosquera should be reliable in minutes. Obviously, we'll get a bit more information over pre-season, what might happen, whether he will be as reliable as we think. But Mosquera is a good option as well. In terms of data that he had last season, if we were to go onto the stats page here and search in Mosquera, and if we were to filter by per 90 minutes, 8.7 DEFCON per 90, so it's roughly 1.3 under the threshold to be achieved each time, but obviously that's an average, so it's good data. I don't particularly expect a goal from Mosquera or an assist, but obviously having Coventry at home in Game Week 1 is a really good position to have. The reason I'm also looking to triple up on the Arsenal defence and maybe not consider a midfielder or a forward is because in attack you've got Gyökeres or Havertz who could both start. There's a rotation risk there, particularly even if Gyökeres was to start Game Week 1, I don't think he could be assured that he would play the full 90 minutes. Havertz could come on in the 60th minute, etc. And likewise with midfield, because of the progression that England made in the World Cup, although not as far as we all hoped, Declan Rice and Saka are entitled to a bit of a longer break after the end of the World Cup. So potentially they might not be coming back to the Arsenal pre-season team until I think about the 11th of August, if I remember correctly. So it only gives them just over a week just to get embedded into that team. So whether, likewise a bit like Gyökeres, whether they do start and then play a full 90 minutes, I'm not so comfortable with. It could be a case of maybe they don't start just because obviously it's Coventry first game of the season. It's a relatively easier game at home. or potentially they do start, but only again 60 minutes or so. So I just don't think right now there's any major appeal in sort of an Arsenal midfield attack. Obviously, they are linked to Vinicius Junior. Now, whether that materialises, we'll wait and see. And also, likewise, with prices for potentially if he did join Arsenal. But right now, we'll go for these three in defence. The third player, or the third defender I want to be picking here is going to be a Man United defender. Now, there's lots of cheap options in Man United defence, partly because they weren't as good of a defence as Arsenal. But the first one we have a look at is Harry Maguire here. Now, last season, a bit injury interrupted, only started 19 games, a goal, 2 assists, nothing exceptional, as to say. But currently with De Ligt out injured, Martinez picked up an injury in the World Cup final, though it's not believed to be that serious. There's that position in centre-back for Man United where right now I think you could put a 5 million Maguire there. He should be okay. His DEFCON isn't particularly amazing. It's 8.2, so it's a little bit below what Mosquera was offering. But again, should be able to get that additional 2 points if that's what he's pushing for. The fourth defender, again, will be Man United one. Now, you could have Luke Shaw or Dalot. I believe those would be the two last ones picking from here. Just for the purposes of trying to keep it a little bit cheaper and a bit more affordable, we'll save 0.5 million here on Luke Shaw over Dalot. Now, if we were to go into the next 11 and we were to do a bit of a player compare using their filter, the function here, and we were to search for Luke Shaw and Dalot, effectively what this is doing is comparing these two players' data points from last season, and then highlights in green if that particular player was better, red if they were worse. Now, we can see here between Dalot and Shaw that last season, XGI and goals, assists, points per 90 minutes, Dalot was pushing it a bit better. DEFCON-wise, marginally better in Shaw, but 0.5, but 0.05 should I say, but both were much below the threshold. I think maybe we could have a look at the end of this draft if we've got 0.5 million to improve someone. Potentially this is a point here. I don't think it's a major selling point though. 0.08 XGI it is, although it's double of Luke Shaw's, it's not above and beyond, for example. And I think there is a potential that a Mazraoui could start ahead of Dalot in game week 1, whereas right now without a second left back, Luke Shaw should be the starter for Man United, unless, for example, Lewis Hall was to join the club. The fifth defender I'll have a look at as well will be Nico Williams. He doesn't play for Man United, so I need to take that off. Nico Williams of Nottingham Forest, 5 million defender. Last season I picked him in game week 1. Traditionally plays that full-back position, left back or right back. Now with Glasner in charge, likely Forest will be playing that 3-4-3 formation we got used to at Palace. So it means Williams will be playing more advanced up the pitch in that left wing-back or right wing-back position. Some corners, crosses, corners, free kicks, etc. He's got some routes to points. If we have a look at his stats from last year as well, we can see XGI per 90, 0.17, so in line with what Dalot was achieving. And likewise with Dalot and Shaw. His DEFCON wasn't fantastic. It was a bit lower than what you'd need for that 10 DEFCON for a defender, but for 5 million, Leeds at home, I think that Williams should be good. There's been a lot of good analysis about Williams as well in the Forest pre-season. He's been one of the standout players. If you want to maybe learn a bit more, check out Alex Volo on Twitter. He does some really good analysis of the pre-season game, so definitely worthwhile checking out why particularly Williams might be a good defender to pick. Now, moving on again, if we have a look at the midfielders maybe you want to be picking from. Now, no surprise that although we don't have Haaland, we are still going to be choosing Bruno Fernandes. I don't really think I need to explain too much why. Obviously, whole first game week of the season, Ipswich second game week, Bruno, free kicks, penalties, some corners as well. He's an all-round really good player last season, 24 assists, the record. I think I will definitely be having Bruno Fernandes in my team, irrespective if I have Haaland or I don't have Haaland in game week 1. Second position as well is a player that obviously you will be having seen on my channel. I've been recommending a bit. Is Dominic Szoboszlai. 7 million this season, a fair bit cheaper than maybe what I was expecting. I was maybe expecting 7.5, 8 million. Last season, corners, free kicks. Without Salah, he did assume penalties. Now, I think we have to bear in mind that obviously Alexander Isak will be fit for the start of the season currently. Whether if he's on the pitch, would be having penalties. I think maybe therefore you have to consider, Szoboszlai's role there. But as we saw last season, some really good data from him. 0.32 XGI per 90. His DEFCON as well, 9.41. A little bit below that 12 threshold from a midfielder. But he's one of the top performing midfielders for that price range. I think if you just have a look at sort of the other options you could be picking from, there's a lot more worse options to be choosing. Now, the third midfielder I'll be picking will be Elliot Anderson here. Obvious reason, really. Last season, he was a DEFCON magnet for Nottingham Forest, achieving roughly around 13 DEFCON per 90. This season, obviously, he's now moved to Man City. Whether we can expect a bit more goal involvement for Anderson, linking up with Semenyo, Haaland, etc. We can see last season 4 goals, 5 assists. He obviously probably won't have the same set pieces he had for Forest last season at Man City. So whether that maybe does impact his XGI, obviously kind of have to wait and see this preseason season what happens. But for the output he makes, the DEFCON, I think you're looking at least a 4-point return each game week with Elliot Anderson. Only 6.5 million as well, so a lot cheaper than some of the alternatives you could be picking for Man City, such as, for example, Anton Semenyo, 8.5 million, Foden, Cherki, who are all a little bit more expensive and maybe aren't as minute guaranteed. The reason Anderson's basically locked in my team, Rodri's injured, he could be off to Real Madrid, so his minutes are in doubt. Nico Gonzalez just isn't of the quality that Man City require. Calvin Phillips obviously won't be playing for Man City, so there is a bit of a void in that sort of space there. I think Elliot Anderson assumes it quite nicely. As I said before in another video, let's just monitor how he gets on after the World Cup. When he gets back with Man City, will he have the time to accustom to the team and start in game week 1? Fingers crossed, because hopefully I'll definitely have him in my team. Now, the fourth midfielder I'll be looking at is another Liverpool player, and we're going to be going with Florian Wirtz. So last season wasn't particularly a great season for Wirtz. A big money move from Leverkusen, but only 5 goals, 4 assists to show for it. A bit of a disappointment, to be honest. A lot of people picked him at the start of last season, hoping for something big. But I think this season, under Areola, Liverpool playing a little bit more of that expansive football again, a bit more free-flowing. I know Areola said in a press conference in pre-season that he sees him as a 10 behind that striker rather than out on the wing. So whether that means he can link up a little bit more directly with Isak, along, in front of Szoboszlai, behind Isak. He's going to probably be on a couple of free kicks as well. We have seen some videos from pre-season where he's practicing in swinging corners from the left-hand side as well. So there's a little bit of corner share there. He's not going to be on penalties or anything like that. But at 7.5 million, kind of rounds that team, quite nicely there. Now, the fifth midfielder I'm going to be having a looking at as well is a 5.51, and that's going to be Pascal Gross. Now, immediately you might look at Pascal Gross and think, why? What's going on here? Last season, only 78 points, 18 starts. Well, he only joined in January last year. Obviously, he's previously played for Brighton, but he only came back in January. And even then, only playing 18 games, 6 assists, 1 goal. His XGI is pretty good. His DEFCON as well, is decent. If we would search for him here we go. 0.29 XGI per 90, 8 DEFCON per 90 as well. So his returns in that perspective are, okay. He has got set pieces, he has got corners, free kicks, and even penalties. Now Danny Welbeck's going to be leaving. There's a void there for penalties. Historically, he has taken penalties as well for Brighton. Now, unless they do sign, another forward that assumes that position. We can assume that Pascal Gross will be taking them. Today, in a friendly game, I forget who the opposition was, but he took and scored a penalty, and he also got an assist from a free kick as well. So the signs there are really good. I think at 5.5 million, maybe you're not looking at an Elliot Anderson where it was all sort of DEFCON orientated, but Pascal Gross 5.5 million this season, I think there's going to be a little bit more goal involvement. Now, if last season's anything to go by as well, potentially you could be seeing goals and assists in the double digits, the teens, hopefully breaking that 10 mark. And at 5.5 million, again, that's another really great cheap option we can put into the team here, especially as we've sort of splashed a bit of cash on Gabriel and the goalkeepers, etc. It's a good way to sort of balance up that midfield, and he'll be minutes reliable, so no concern there. The strikers now, because we haven't got Haaland, we're going to have to get some good strikers and a good round balance as well to be able to bench boost on Game Week 1. The first particular one I'll be having a look at is going to be João Pedro. Probably no surprise here, the reason why. Ownership is really high, 55% of managers backing him for Game Week 1. Now, he did get a hat-trick in, I think, about 7 minutes in pre-season against some Australian team. Now, that's not really a great indicator, but I think last season we saw particularly why he was good and why he's a player to value. At the start of the season, he got a lot of returns, and I didn't own him. I was a bit sceptical of that ownership, whether people were sort of expecting a bit too much from him, but it really came to bite me. Last season, 0.57 XGI per 90, slightly less without the penalties he took, but still, half a return per 90 minutes. That's really good. 7.5 million as well. I think it's a bit cheaper than maybe what was expecting, so can definitely go my team here. Against Fulham as well, new manager for Fulham. Pre-season, they have looked a bit susceptible at the back. I think they are trying to play a high line. Now, whether João Pedro can, Chelsea can benefit in Game Week 1 against that and try and push up. Obviously, you've got Alonso as well, new manager for Chelsea, so a little bit unexpected in terms of what we can, maybe see from Chelsea. But I think for the purpose of Game Week 1, João Pedro, he'll give you that protection against a lot of other managers as well who are choosing him. No one's going to be captaining him in Game Week 1, but I think he should give you some points. And if he does go on a burst as well at the start of the season like he did last year, you're protected there from that perspective. The third forward I'm going to be picking here would be another one last season. A lot of people doubted, but ended up smashing it. It's Igor Thiago of Brentford. Now, no one really chose him last season. He had, I think, he joined in the 24-25 season, but he'd picked up quite a serious injury, so he basically got ruled out of that in his second season. Brentford had lost Tony and Mbeumo, and then this unknown Brazilian guy was being put up front, having only played, I think, 2 games for Brentford at that point, coming from the Belgium league. Thiago absolutely smashed it. Second highest scoring player in the league last season, only behind Erling Haaland. And as you can see here, the stats back up why. 0.62 XGI per 90. He's on penalties for Brentford. He was cheap last season. Now he's a bit more expensive this season, but obviously because we haven't got Haaland in this draft, we can afford to pay that 8 million for him here. Spurs at home. I'm not entirely sure what to expect from Spurs this season. Obviously under De Zerbi, the end of last season they did tighten up at the back, and that's ultimately how they managed to stay up. Whether you can expect a big hit and run Game Week 1 from Thiago, I'm not too sure, but I think he gives you some reliability for minutes. Although they have signed Callum Wilson, Thiago will definitely be the starter in Game Week 1 against Spurs. So I think he's a good way to protect yourself here. And only 15% of managers backing him, so he's not a big differential, but there's 85% of managers there who don't have Thiago. If he was to get a goal in Game Week 1, that's a good return. And likewise Leeds, Sunderland in the game weeks after. There's a good initial run for Brentford there, and he gives you some exposure. Now, to conclude the forward line, and the last player I'll be picking is from a team that I think I've maybe looked over a little bit in pre-season so far, but it's going to be Brobby for Sunderland. Now, whether Sunderland can repeat sort of their theatrics from last season? I'm not too sure, but if you had a look at Robbie's returns, managed to get 7 goals, 2 assists, a little bit above what his XGI suggested, but made 22 starts. With Robbie, you're not expecting the same sort of penalties as a Thiago would offer. He won't have them, and I think that's Enzo Lefebvre who takes penalties for Sunderland. But I think for the start of the season, where currently Sunderland haven't got sort of an obvious alternative up front, I think Robbie offers good value for money. He's only 6 million, owned by 21% of managers, so more than Thiago. Ipswich at home, a newly promoted side. Obviously, we have seen them before, but under Gary O'Neill now, they haven't played a competitive match under Gary O'Neill. Are we entirely sure how Ipswich would fare up? We can assume, based on how they did 2 years ago, they're going to concede a lot more goals than they did in the Championship. So, yeah, potentially Robbie's a cheap option to attack that Ipswich defence in game week 1. So just having a look then at what the team offers here from a well-rounded perspective without Haaland. You've got triple Arsenal here in the defence. You've got two Sunderland players playing Ipswich, 1 attacker, 1 goalkeeper. You've got triple Man United as well. You've got 2 defenders and Bruno Fernandes. You've got a little bit of exposure to Man City. Now, obviously, because we haven't chose Haaland, we still want to try and get a bit of a Man City presence in there. So we've gone with a cheap option, Elliot Anderson. Whether maybe you'd want to find a way to sort of get Semenyo in here or a Phil Foden, for example, obviously go ahead and try that. We've tried to balance up a bit. Again, with Pascal Gross here to bring that price down, and João Pedro, Thiago, balance up that forward line. And then basically what you can do here, bench boost this team. That means all these players will have a chance of scoring points and they'll contribute to your game week 1 score. It means then you can get that game week 1 bench boost out the way. Try and then, because of how the fixtures swing with this sort of example of a team, you might want to consider a wild card in game week 3 or game week 4, particularly because although, for example, Man United have good fixtures up until game week 3, Man City in game week 4, that's going to be a bad fixture. And obviously as well, you're missing Haaland here. Man City play Coventry in game week 3, so I think you'll definitely want Erling Haaland in for that team there. Now, because he's 15.5 million, how do you get to that price point from this team? I think we've only got 1 million in the bank, so I think you either have to wildcard or free hit in game week 3. And potentially, if you was to wildcard in game week 3, now, if you want to still have Bruno Fernandes, Haaland, how can you maybe afford a Cole Palmer in there as well? Chelsea have got Hull City in game week 4, so you're going to definitely want a little bit of Chelsea presence. So potentially looking at a free hit 4 with a wildcard 3. Or on the alternate, if you wanted to have a free hit 3 and sort of go heavy on those players, a bit of Man United, Haaland, Man City generally, you can do so. But then in game week 4, when you sort of return back to this team, what you'll have is three Man United players playing Man City. Likewise, with any Man City players you bring in, they'll be playing against Man United. I think Arsenal as well, Sunderland away, so it's not particularly bad. You could therefore potentially maybe use free transfers in game week 4 to try and smooth that out. But that's a decision you can sort of make. I think the idea here as well is that you can be quite aggressive with a bench boost one without Haaland, just simply because then you've got the first fixtures where you're using that bench boost, the second fixtures where you're going to have Man United against Ipswich, Sunderland are going to be playing Fulham, Chelsea will be playing Brighton, etc. You can then look game week 3, only a very small sample size of data, but you could then potentially use that free hit or wild card to then remove sort of the excess cost here. So you could downgrade Roos to a 4 million forward. You can reconfigure the team to get Haaland back in. You can get a dead third forward option, a 4.5 million forward, for example. And then you've got a little bit more money in your starting 11, less money on the bench, but you've got that bench boost out of the way. So you've obtained all those points you could potentially receive in game week 1. And then you can just sort of look forward to the rest of the game weeks up until the second round of chips and know that you've got the most money you possibly can in the middle of the team. Now, there's a couple of variations we're going to have a look at as well for this team. So obviously this is sort of one variation you could make, and it's one that I like. If we were to take out, maybe you don't like the exposure of triple Arsenal defence, if Coventry were to score, that's 3 clean sheets gone. Potentially, therefore, you could take out Mosquera. If you didn't like, for example, João Pedro, because maybe there's alternative forwards you like, you could take out him as well. Thiago, and what we can do basically here is some players, maybe you want to get a little bit more DEFCON in the defence. You could put Tarkowski in. Crystal Palace at home is not bad, but James Tarkowski last season is solid DEFCON centre-back, so you can expect a floor of at least 4 points there. In attack, if you want to sort of explore alternative strikers, maybe you want to get a triple up on that Liverpool attack. Alexander Isak away at his old club. If Wirtz or Szoboszlai were to get an assist, would you guess that Alexander Isak potentially was the person who scored it? Yeah, maybe. It gives you sort of a lot of what you call like a covariance. It's where, if Szoboszlai and Wirtz to make that return, would Isak likely be the person also to be on the other side with the assist or the goal? And likewise, if Isak was to score or make that assist, could it be Szoboszlai or Wirtz who get that goal? So it gives you a triple up on Liverpool attack. Newcastle away, and obviously Eddie Howe's gone. They're going to have a new manager only a couple of weeks before the season starts. I think Newcastle potentially could be a team to attack. We're going to have to see what this new manager brings to the table. They're losing a lot of players, so yeah, I don't just think because it's Newcastle away. Don't sort of think historically that that's a tough fixture. Now I think it's a completely new ballpark. We don't really know what to expect from Newcastle, so let's sort of attack them while we don't. But even while Newcastle don't know what to expect and maybe necessarily how to play as well, because it's a new manager. And likewise for a third forward, you got 7 million in the bank. I'm just going to keep a little bit of flexibility there. I like to do that just to avoid any price rises. I'm going to put Dominic Calvert-Lewin in. Away in Nottingham Forest, on penalties, 14 goals last season, really good forward, and I think he'll again be started for Leeds up front this season. So let me know if you potentially prefer this team here, what your thoughts are. There's a little bit less exposure to the Arsenal defence, but you have got a bit more exposure to the Liverpool attacking line. And again, you've now got a piece of Leeds in here, less Chelsea. So if you were to go with this team, I think you definitely would be considering that wildcard 4 or a free hit 4 to get some Chelsea exposure against when they play Hull. Okay. And then if we were to have a look at another alternative of the draft I made here, basically what we're going to try and do is mix up the players again. And if we were to take out Wirtz here as well, and if we were to reinstate, I won't give you a spoiler just yet, but potentially if you don't like Nottingham Forest defence, maybe you think, okay, Williams is an attacking full-back, wing-back, but I don't think Nottingham Forest can hold a clean sheet. One player then you could consider is Alderete of Sunderland. Last season, if you was to pull up his stats and have a bit of a look at what he was doing. So last season, averaging above that DEFCON threshold there with a 10.04 average across 90 minutes. His XGI isn't fantastic, so we don't really expect any big clean sheets there, but any big goal returns. But if Sunderland could keep a clean sheet against Ipswich, you're looking at 2 points for playing more than 60 minutes, 2 points for your DEFCON, and obviously then your points for your clean sheet as well. So you could get potentially a really good return from Alderete. He's obviously now 5 million. He was the 4 million last season, so that's why we haven't taken out a couple of other players to be able to afford this. But only owned by 1% of players. Potentially that's a differential clean sheet you could get in game week 1 against Ipswich. If we would then, because you don't like Williams, but you maybe still like a bit of the Forest defence, potentially you could have a look at Matt Sells, the Nottingham Forest goalkeeper. He's 5 million, so effectively a swap of Roofs to Sells here. You can see we've just basically taken out one Sunderland goalkeeper, putting in a Forest one, and vice versa with the defenders. So Sells could go in, obviously at home to Leeds here. Maybe not a fan of Sells. We could have a look at some of the other 5 million goalkeepers. For Bruggen, 4.5 minutes and making an extra save in there. Petrovic, I don't think so, because they're playing away at Man City on a bench boost one. That wouldn't make sense. Maybe Sanchez, if you want to get a bit of that Chelsea exposure and you want to try and use those free transfers to get to Chelsea in Game Week 4. We can't reach Le Mans here because we've already got triple Man United, but those are some examples of what maybe you could be doing. There is Kinski as well, 4.5 million. He had a really good game just today against Chelsea in a pre-season friendly. Potentially he's going to be the starting goalkeeper for Spurs this season if they don't make another signing, and I assume Vakari will be leaving, so one to keep an eye on there if you maybe are interested in taking a little bit more value out the goalkeepers and reinvesting elsewhere in the team. The other players we're going to be having a look at are putting Isak back into the team here. So we'll put him back in the forward line. Don't really need to explain why. But this time, because we haven't got a triple up in Liverpool, we'll have a look at Cole Palmer here. But what have I done wrong with this? I shouldn't have put Isak back in. It should have been João Pedro. And then the funds will add up. We've got 0.5 million in the bank. So again, like I said, if you do maybe want to be considering not using a wild card or a free hit early because you want to be able to get to a Chelsea team either with free transfers or you want to use those free transfers on other players, whether, for example, you want to be removing Man United defence in Game Week 4, for example, or Ipswich players after Sunderland players after their initial fixtures against Ipswich and Fulham have worn out. You could therefore have João Pedro and Palmer in the team, kind of ready for that Game Week 4. They have got a tough fixture against Arsenal in Game Week 3, but you can sort of refigure around that. There'll be other players you can bring off the bench in those examples. Maybe you even want to go a step further and have Sanchez in goal if you really do think that Chelsea will be a good team against Fulham in Game Week 1. But again, this is sort of the third draft I was looking at here and potentially what players you could be considering. I think one last point I would want to make is Pascal Gross. Now, if you maybe aren't too sure on him, he has got some good returns, but you think he's getting a little bit older. He's in his 30s now. Maybe you don't like because he's playing defensively for Brighton, and also you think Aston Villa at home, it's a tough fixture. You don't want to use a bench boost on Pascal Gross there. You could take him out and you could put in Sunderland's Lefay. He's only 6 million, and that would use your full money in the bank here. Last season he had a good year, first season with Sunderland in the Premier League, 5 goals, 6 assists, really good XGI. He will be on penalties as well. So he's got a good, well-rounded route to points for Sunderland, playing that attacking midfielder, so a bit more advanced than what Pascal Gross would be. He is owned by a few more people, 12%, but he's still a relatively good differential. And if we used to use the players comparison tool again on Next 11, and for example, we used to search here for Enzo Lefay and Pascal Gross, we can see here that sort of both of them have got good stats. Lefay's averaging more points and goals per 90, but on the other hand, Pascal Gross is getting more assists. There's quite a big gap in between their goals, expected goals per 90. Enzo Lefay, definitely, you can see the benefits there of having an attacking midfielder, getting double the XG of Pascal Gross, but Gross a little bit more in the expected assist perspective. Surprisingly for DEFCON as well is that actually Lefay's better for DEFCON on a per 90 basis, 9.8. It's almost just 2 above what Pascal Gross achieves. So there's a little bit of food for thought anyway. If you do maybe want to consider someone alternative to Pascal Gross, you could maybe put Lefay in there, or potentially you could have both, and then you could take Palmer back out, obviously downgrade that to Gross, and then you've got 4 million extra to go and reinvest elsewhere. So maybe you want to upgrade Luke Shaw to Dalot, or maybe you want to just get generally more expensive defender, one that's going to get a bit more DEFCON. Or alternatively, if you was to potentially want to increase Robbie to Isak, you don't want triple Sunderland, maybe prefer triple Liverpool or double Liverpool in this example, you could do so. But yeah, Anyway, I thought I'd just make a quick video highlighting some different opportunities you could have in Game Week 1 without Haaland in the example of here using a bench boost, just to show how without Haaland you can get a well-rounded squad of 15 and enable you to do an early bench boost. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, give it a comment below, let me know what your thoughts are, particularly if there are any other different players you're considering. And yeah, subscribe if you want to see the next video as well. But otherwise, thanks for watching. Hope you have a nice weekend, and I'll see you soon.